Hey guys, Colin here to talk to you about the short-term and long-term effects of being seated for a long period of time. So most people know it has a tendency to round your shoulders and bring your head forward. And you may get headaches or you might have tingling in your hands, you might have breathing issues. All of these are related to this posture. And what happens when people especially are focused on, say, a book or something they're writing or a screen is the body's natural tendency is, as we put more attention on those things, is for the head to come closer. Just like when you're talking to somebody, you're really listening in, right? Your head comes forward. So it's an unconscious thing. I used to be in the video game industry. We got these huge screens to try and prevent that. It didn't make any difference. We thought it was related to how well we saw, but not the case. So what we want to talk about, though, is how it affects other things. I mentioned the breathing. That's a huge deal. It affects your rib cage function, your shoulder function. All right? It affects the nerve functioning down into your hands and how well the nerve and blood supply gets into your arms and hands. It can create a dowager's hump right at the very base of the cervical spine, a buildup of tissue and kind of a hunching thing. When your head comes forward, your chin doesn't naturally glide like this on a level or parallel with the floor plane. It tends to come like this. So the muscles at the base of the skull have to lift it up so you can see straight ahead. And this is, your body naturally does that because finding your balance is partially related to being able to see the horizon line. So we do this naturally, but then all these muscles tighten up at the base of the skull. That affects the 12 cranial nerves, which affects vision, balance, hearing, a variety of other things. It can cause all sorts of headaches, migraines, all these things that are caused by nerve impingement and that kind of syndrome. So the other thing that happens is as you come more forward, the rib cage tends to drop, right? So as you're doing this and you're dropping forward, what do you think happens to your breathing? You're not getting as much oxygen in when you breathe. That's a problem because any muscular function and nervous system function going on in the body, in order for those systems to stay healthy and to move out the waste products that happen from muscles working, you need oxygen and blood carries it there. So when you're static for long periods of time, you're not getting the blood flow going on, and at the same time, the blood carries the oxygen, and because the breathing is compromised here, the diaphragm, which is supposed to drop like this as you fill up with air and your rib cage is supposed to expand backwards, that's not happening. Instead, people start breathing with the muscles in the front of the neck and breathing up in the chest. They're not getting as much oxygen, but what else happens is that these muscles get tight, and guess what? Pulls your head farther forward. So you can see that there's this whole kind of negative spiral that feeds into itself that makes it worse and worse. So you got to undo that. And you don't want to, of course, you don't want to spend an hour trying to do that every day. And you don't want to give up your job or some of your habits. So I'm giving you an easy alternative. The one other thing I want to mention, though, is that the internal organs can be really affected by this as well. And also your pelvis in through here. It can affect the tipping of your pelvis. And I'll explain that in a sec. So first, the internal organs. When you're not breathing with your diaphragm and it's not dropping down because you compressed here, your organs aren't getting this natural massage that goes on with the diaphragm just gently moving up and down a little bit. The other thing that happens is you're compressing your internal organs. They're stacked on top of each other. And what happens is they don't get as much blood and oxygen. They have a harder time staying healthy, and there's a tendency for them to collapse on top of each other and become more diseased. So the last thing is being in this seated position affecting your pelvis. You're putting the hip flexors, these muscles that run right through here to the inside of the legs and all the way through your abdominal cavity back into your low back. You're putting them in a shortened state for a long period of time. Muscles and connective tissue adapt to these states. So what that means is when you go to stand up, you can't stretch out as much. So one of two things happen. It either pulls on your low back and creates an excessive arch here, or it tips your pelvis farther forward, so you're starting to fall forward, and you need to correct that with the head or the upper body rounding and the head coming back, or some combination of those things. So hopefully that's good motivation for spending 5 minutes a day to correct this so you can continue doing whatever activity has you seated.